Order. 74 honourable members were able to question the Secretary of State in 59 minutes of exclusively backbench time, so I thank colleagues for the succinctness of their questions and the Secretary of State for the succinctness of her answers. Statement, the Secretary of State for Scotland, Mr Secretary Moore.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I would like to make a statement on Scotland's constitutional future in the United Kingdom. In May 2011, the Scottish National Party won a significant electoral victory, a victory this government has openly acknowledged. The SNP have consistently campaigned for Scottish independence, and their 2011 manifesto included a pledge to hold an independence referendum. As a Scot, I think it is vital that the Scottish people make a clear decision about our future within the United Kingdom, a decision made in Scotland by the people of Scotland. But at present, there is a lack of clarity about the referendum, its outcome, and what the implications of that outcome would be, all of which creates economic uncertainty that is bad for jobs and investment. Since last year's election, we have been asking the Scottish Government to set out its plans for a referendum, but so far it has not done so. In particular, it has not said anything more about its legal power to deliver a referendum. This is not an issue that can be ducked. To legislate for a referendum on independence, the Scottish Parliament must have the legal power to do so. It is the Government's clear view that the Scottish Parliament does not have that legal power. Scotland's future within the UK will be the most important decision we, as Scots, take in our lifetime. It is essential that the referendum is legal, fair and decisive. As a government, we have been clear since May 2011 that we will not stand in the way of a referendum on independence. But neither will we stand on the sidelines and let uncertainty continue. Any referendum must let all of us in Scotland determine our future clearly and decide whether to stay part in the longest, most successful partnership of nations in history. That is why we are publishing a consultation to seek views on how to deliver a legal, fair and decisive referendum. For a referendum to take place, legislation is required. This ensures that any referendum on any issue is subject to detailed consideration, debate and clear and consistent regulation. In 2010, the Scottish Government published plans to legislate for a referendum on independence. We have considered those plans carefully against the devolution settlement in Scotland as set out in the Scotland Act 1998. The 1998 Act is clear. The Scottish Parliament cannot legislate on matters reserved to this Parliament. Amongst the issues that are reserved is the Constitution, including the union of the kingdoms of Scotland and England. Any act of the Scottish Parliament that relates to a reserved matter is quite simply not law. Whether or not a bill relates to a reserved matter depends on its purpose and effect. We are clear that the Scottish Government's purpose in bringing forward a referendum is to secure independence. Their intended effect is to secure a mandate for negotiating this. Both purpose and effect relate directly to the reserved matter of the Union. Any distinction between a binding or advisory referendum is artificial. As the law stands, an independence referendum bill is outside the competence of the Scottish Parliament. A bill could be challenged in court, and it is our view that the Scottish Government would lose. So the consultation paper I am publishing today sets out different ways to deliver a legal, fair and decisive referendum. It explains how the powers for a referendum could be devolved under the Section 30 order-making provisions in the Scotland Act 1998, our preferred approach. It also invites views on devolving the powers using other legislation, including the current Scotland Bill, and for opinions on the possibility of running the referendum directly. Given the clear legal problem that exists, We want to work with the Scottish Government to provide the answer. This is not about the mandates of Scotland's two governments or who calls the shots. It is about empowering the people of Scotland to participate in a legal referendum. That means that the UK Government is willing to give the Scottish Parliament the powers to hold a referendum which they otherwise cannot do legally. But as well as being legal, a referendum must be fair and it must be decisive. For those reasons, the rules of the referendum must be demonstrably above board. The referendum should be overseen by those who have neutrality and the proven expertise to inspire confidence in the fairness of the process, such as the Electoral Commission. But these issues are not for politicians alone to consider. That is why the consultation process that starts today will let people express their views on when a referendum should be held, what questions should be asked, who should be entitled to vote, and how the campaign should be run. It will be open to all people in Scotland, and indeed out with Scotland, to make their views clear rather than rely on the opinions of politicians. It is in everyone's interests that the two governments take on board the needs of Scotland and the opinions of its people, work together and deliver the legal, fair and decisive referendum that is in our common interests. Mr. Speaker, the Government believes passionately in the United Kingdom. For over 300 years, our country has brought people together in the most successful multinational state the world has known. This Government is clear that independence is not in the interests of Scotland. The United Kingdom brings strength to Scotland. Scotland brings strength to the United Kingdom. We recognise that this is not a view shared by all, but politicians from both sides of the debate owe it to everyone in Scotland to ensure that the referendum that's delivered is done so in a legal, fair and decisive way. The future of Scotland must not be worked out in secret behind closed doors, nor determined by wrangling in the courts. It is my task to ensure this referendum is made in Scotland by the people of Scotland for the future of Scotland. I commend this statement to the House.
Margaret Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I, of course, thank the Secretary of State for prior sight of the statement before the announcement in the House this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, as a consequence of the result of the Scottish elections in May, we accept the SNP have a clear mandate to ask the people of Scotland whether they want to remain part of the United Kingdom or not. There is absolutely no doubt that this referendum will take place, and what we now must do across all political parties is work together to make sure that the referendum is fair and legal and commands the complete authority of the Scottish people. However, in light of the statement from the Secretary of State, we have some further questions and concerns that I hope he can address in response this afternoon. Can I begin by asking the Secretary of State if he can indicate how he plans to take forward his proposals and the consultation for the Section 30 order and how he wishes to see that move forward? Secondly, without publishing any of their own legal advice, the Scottish Government is apparently contesting the authority of the legal advice held by the Secretary of State, as I understand it. What assurances can the Secretary of State give the Scottish people that the advice he holds rests on a sound foundation, a foundation that is robust and authoritative on this issue? And to ensure maximum transparency, does he plan to publish his legal advice, and would he recommend that the Scottish Government do the same? Thirdly, Scottish Labour is clear that any question on separation must be a straight yes or no choice. We therefore welcome the acknowledgement yesterday by the Deputy First Minister of Scotland, of the Scottish Government, that this is also the preference of the Scottish National Party. Can the Secretary of State confirm that this is also the position of the coalition parties? If so, it is important to recognise that we now have a situation in Scotland where all 4 major political parties are in agreement that there should be a straight choice of a yes-no referendum. And that's a very significant development. Fourthly, can the Secretary of State confirm today with absolute clarity whether the UK Government supports the involvement of the Electoral Commission in any conduct of the referendum? The Electoral Commission has overseen referendums in Wales and the rest of the United Kingdom this very year. The Electoral Commission has the highest level of confidence and respect to deal with the oversight of this referendum as a non-partisan arbiter, and we are of the opinion that it is the body best placed to oversee the referendum. And I wonder if the Secretary of State shares that view. Finally, can the Secretary of State confirm to this House who in government is leading on this consultation? Is it the Secretary of State or is it perhaps the Chancellor? I'm afraid that the UK Government appears to have sent out the wrong signal by having the Chancellor, rather than the Secretary of State for Scotland, lead on this vitally important Scottish issue in the Cabinet. So can the Secretary of State confirm to the House today which Minister will lead this consultation going forward? Mr Speaker, as the First Minister asserted last May, the sooner the vote on the future of Scotland is held, the better. Scotland's economy is flatlining. 1 in 4 young Scottish men are out of work. Today we are told that Scotland faces record levels of child and family poverty. What we cannot afford to do is to spend the next 4 years obsessing about the process of a referendum. The time is now for parties to work together, get on with the debate, get on with the decision as to where Scotland's best future lies. In conclusion, Mr Speaker, the Scottish people face a momentous decision in this referendum. What Labour will not do is sit back and support a process that turns into a petty fight between the 2 things Scotland rejects: separation and the Tories. Scotland deserves better. Scotland deserves better than politicians bickering on the process of this issue. We must now move as quickly as possible onto a debate of substance that puts Scotland's people and the Scottish interests first.
State.
Mr Speaker, may I first of all endorse exactly the points she made at the end of her contribution about us getting on with a debate which could actually ensure that the Scottish people and Scottish interests are at the heart of this debate, not the interests of politicians in different political parties. I'm delighted to be able to confirm to her, as she will see as she reads the consultation paper and as she sees from the fact that I'm making the statement today, that I'm leading on this for the Government, working with all my colleagues. Let me go through the points she made. And first of all, as I acknowledged in my statement, the SNP secured an important victory in the elections last year, and as part of that, they had set out their clear intention to have a referendum. What was not so clear was how they would do that, and it is our view, as I've said already, that the legal position is that the Scottish Parliament does not have the power to conduct any kind of referendum. It's important, therefore, that we work with the Scottish Government to ensure that we can get on with this historic decision. She asked how we will consult. That is the consultation document itself offers people from across Scotland the opportunity to write, involve themselves in this process. I will, of course, be going out and around Scotland myself. I'm sure many others will be part of that debate too. And it's important that everybody in Scotland can feel part of this process. As far as legal advice is concerned, she'll be aware of the ministerial code and the convention followed by successive governments. The legal advice is neither acknowledged or published, but I would actually ask her just to look very carefully at the consultation document and to look at the authority that we are bringing to bear here, which is the Scotland Act 1998, sections 29 and 30 and Schedule 5 in particular. I think when you look at that carefully, there is only one clear outcome, and that is that there is no legal authority for any referendum. We need to get that resolved. She asked if, like her, I support a simple, straightforward yes-no question on Scotland's place within the United Kingdom. I completely agree. That is what we are recommending. And on the issue of the oversight, I think it's entirely fair and reasonable that we should have the oversight of the process of a referendum by a body that has got widespread experience and that has neutrality and is seen to be above and beyond the fray. The Electoral Commission, it seems to me, fits that bill, but I look forward to hearing other people's reactions in the course of this consultation.
Mr John Redwood.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What would the Government propose would happen to the shared debts and the shared membership of the EU were Scotland to leave the Union?
The Right Honourable Gentleman asks a very important issue, which I'm sure will be one of many which are at the heart of the debate about Scotland's future when we get on to the referendum itself. For now, I want to make sure that we can actually get on with that proper substantive debate.
Mr Jack Straw.
Could I just follow up the very important point made by the Right Honourable Gentleman? In the course of the debates during the referendum, there will be claim and counterclaim about the adverse or beneficial effects to the people of Scotland and, by extension, to the other parts of the United Kingdom from separation or retention of the Union. Would the Secretary of State give consideration, in consultation with all the parties, to drawing on the experience of the Office of National Statistics, the Statistics Authority and the OBR to see whether there could not be a body set up, provide authoritative information, factual information about the benefits and consequences of separation or of union. So at least when there's an argument, it's an argument on a common currency.
It's gone very quiet over there.
The issue of the currency will, of course, be an issue for the debate as well. The Right Honourable and learned gentleman makes a very important point and draws on a lot of experience about the legislation we're talking about here. I think when we get to that substantive debate, which I think has to happen sooner rather than later, it will be important that we're able to turn to agreed sources of information. That is something we can debate and consider for another day, but I accept the point you make.
Sir Mingus Camp.
I'm well aware of the convention that governments do not publish legal advice. But as my right honourable friend has pointed out himself, this is a decision which can almost be described as unique because it would bring to an end some hundreds of years of history. In those circumstances, can I urge my right honourable friend to consider again whether the advice received by the government should not be published so as to achieve the degree of clarity which the Right Honourable Gentleman a moment or two ago spoke about in relation to statistics. I welcome this announcement today. I particularly welcome it because political, economic and social uncertainty for the next 2 years would be deeply, deeply damaging to the people of Scotland. I also take the view, and I wonder if my Right Honourable friend shares it, that if there are those who are so confident of the case for independence, why is it they are unwilling to countenance a referendum now? Could it be that the brave hearts are no longer quite so brave as they've been before?
My Right Honourable and learned friend makes a very important point, and it has been a feature of the last few months. They've seemed strangely quiet about the need to get on with this referendum on an issue that they have campaigned for many, many generations. Can I say I also am glad of his welcome. What I would encourage him to do, if I may say so, about the legal advice is to look carefully at the consultation paper, look at the clear view we have about the authority in the Scotland Act 1998. I'm absolutely certain that opinion is right, and I think that as a result of that, we need to ensure that the Scottish Parliament has the authority to pass a referendum bill and get on with this most important decision.
Mr Angus Robertson.
And I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for the tenuous sharing of his statement in advance of it today. Last year, the Scottish National Party won a historic landslide victory on a platform to hold a Scottish independence referendum in the second half of the Scottish Parliament. The Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party opposed an independence referendum, and each one of these parties lost heavily in the election. So why is it that this Westminster government is trying to dictate terms about the referendum to the democratically elected Scottish government, which has a mandate on this issue? Specifically, why is the Westminster government seeking to dictate the date of the referendum? Why is it the Westminster government is seeking to dictate the questions on the ballot paper? And why is it that the Westminster government is seeking to exclude 16 and 17-year-olds from this important and historic referendum?
I'm not sure how often I have to acknowledge the victory of the SNP last year before the Honourable Gentleman will hear me say it, but I'm happy to repeat that I recognise the victory that they had last year. But I'm really surprised that he has such a problem with the law, because I'm sure that an independent Scotland would want to be ruled by the rule of law. Therefore, I think it's in all our interests. It's in all our interests to ensure that the legal basis of any referendum is clear. I'm saying to him, it is not there. It is not possible to have a legal referendum. It doesn't matter whether it's advisory or what you call it, legally binding. A referendum has to be legal. The authority is not there. And what I'm offering to the Honourable Gentleman, to the First Minister and to all of his party is a way by which all of us in Scotland can get on with this decision without needing to have the decision made by the courts rather than by people going to the ballot box. When he says about the terms on which we might do this, I repeat the fact that we're consulting. We are asking people across Scotland and elsewhere who may have an opinion to tell us what they think of our proposals. We want to do this together between the two governments, and I hope he will encourage his colleagues there to get alongside us and work with us. As far as the date is concerned, there is no date in the consultation paper and the draft Section 30 order that we publish. As far as the ballot paper is concerned, I actually heard the Deputy First Minister say yesterday she preferred having a single question. So I think it's quite useful to get on and do what she wants to do as well as the rest of us. And on the issue of the franchise, what we're suggesting is that the franchise that was the right basis on which the First Minister and all his colleagues in the Scottish Parliament were elected should be the same franchise used to determine this historic decision. As far as 16 and 17-year-olds participating is concerned, there's an entirely fair debate about their role in the electoral system generally, but it shouldn't be focused around a single electoral event to suit one party or another. Let's just get on with the debate on the fairest of terms. That's what we're offering.
Mr. Bernard Jenkins.
Mr. Speaker, may I welcome my right honourable friend's statement, simply because it is high time that the debate about Scottish nationalism that has been raging in Scotland should be debated here in Westminster too. But would he agree that there can be no question of holding a referendum that is legal, fair and decisive unless the proposal on the ballot paper is absolutely clear? And generally, I have to say, I favour post-legislative referendums.
I say to the Honourable Gentleman that it is important that we have a legal referendum, that it is fair in terms of the terms under which it is conducted, and that it is decisive. I would like to see it sooner rather than later. I think it is damaging to Scotland and to its economy, affecting jobs and investment, if we simply have delay for a long time. I want to ensure that we have a proper debate now about when that should be, and in this consultation we set out the way by which we can sort the date of the referendum by agreement.
Anne McKechan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's already been a great deal of noise as a result of this statement this afternoon, but it is very clear that the people of Scotland will not take to people playing games with their constitutional future, and they will expect both administrations to work together to find a solution to the problem which the Secretary of State has indicated today. Can he provide us with more information about how he will consult and negotiate with the Scottish Government, and in particular whether this matter will be referred to the Joint Ministerial Council and, if required, be subject to their dispute procedure?
The honourable lady, I'm going to first of all say I'm grateful for her welcome to this, and also absolutely agree with her that people in Scotland will not thank any of us from any political party, whether we're elected in Scotland to serve here in the House of Commons or to serve in the Scottish Parliament, playing politics with this most important process leading to the most important decision we will ever take as a country. So I agree with her. It's important, as I've set out in my statement today and as we say in the consultation paper, that the two governments should work together. I spoke earlier on this afternoon to the First Minister. I've asked him to consider carefully what is in the consultation paper, and I look forward to meeting with him early on to discuss it further.
Mr Mark Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given the economic implications of independent Scotland and my constituents in Milton Keynes, when will the English finally get a say over the future of the Union?
I have to say to my honourable friend that as far as the decision over who decides this issue, I think it's important that the people of Scotland get to decide their place in the United Kingdom. I am confident when they do, they will vote to stay within the United Kingdom.
Mr Michael Connaughty.
Can I just commend the Secretary of State for the balanced way in which he approached this, unlike the leader of the sulking six from the SNP on my left. It is very important we get clear, this is not the end of the debate about the powers for Scotland. This is only about the referendum about whether in or out, which I happen to think is 13 years too late. It should be on the ballot paper in the first devolution referendum. Is it quite clear we can continue with the debate for some of us aspire to give more powers to Scotland within the United Kingdom?
I absolutely agree. There's a legitimate debate about the powers that Scotland has within the United Kingdom. We have spent a long time in this House, and their Lordships will now consider the Scotland Bill, which will significantly enhance the powers of the Scottish Parliament, creating much greater financial accountability and giving them much greater economic powers. I believe the debate on devolution will continue. Each of our parties, whether it's the Labour Party or the two parties in the coalition, and indeed the SNP as well, I think we'll all continue to debate it. But when we have extended the powers of the Scottish Parliament, it has always been on the basis of a vigorous debate where parties set out their stalls, a coming together as we develop consensus, as we did in the Constitutional Convention and in the Calman Commission, and then legislation that is based on that consensus. And I think that offers the best model for further powers to the Scottish Parliament. But now we've got a huge amount of uncertainty because of this prospect of an independence referendum. I want to get rid of the uncertainty. Let's get on with the debate about Scotland's place in the United Kingdom.
Mr Malcolm Bruce.
Mr Speaker, further to that point, does my honourable friend accept that the dynamics of transferring power from Scotland to England is something that our party's Liberal Democrats have fought for decades and in fact delivered for Scotland, and that is a process that can only continue within the dynamics of the United Kingdom, should not be used to confuse a question about whether the people of Scotland can decide whether or not to stay in the United Kingdom? And does he welcome, as I do, the indication from the SNP that finally they'll stop confusing the electorate of Scotland and give us a straight question: are we going to stay in the UK or not?
I absolutely agree with my right honourable friend. I mean, we have had various suggestions about Devo Max being thrown around without any definition of what it might be, and nobody who's willing to stand up and say it's actually what they want to put forward themselves. I agree with him, of course, that as a party, the Liberal Democrats have proudly put forward ways to modernise the United Kingdom constitution, and of course all parties in this House will continue to do that. For now, what matters is that we get on and have a decision about our future that is clear and is decisive, and I welcome the Deputy First Minister's comments yesterday.
Anas Sarwar.
I broadly welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. It's clear the SNP won a mandate for a referendum. But now that they've won that mandate, it's no longer the SNP's referendum or Alex Salmond's referendum, but Scotland's referendum. Because Scotland's political future is way more important than any single political party or any individual politician. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that all political parties and civic society must now come together in the best interest of the people of Scotland and decide when that referendum should be?
First of all, may I congratulate the Honourable Gentleman on his new role within the Scottish Labour Party. I'm sure he will be travelling the length and breadth of the country to make the case that he was just making, amongst other things. And as far as his central point is concerned, I absolutely agree with him that it's important that all parties, and those of none, get involved in this debate so that all of the people of Scotland are engaged in resolving the process and then getting on with the real debate.
This is Eleanor Lang.
Given the astounding arrogance of the SNP in refusing to acknowledge that the Scottish Government simply do not have the legal power to hold a referendum, is the Secretary of State aware that most people in all parts of this United Kingdom welcome the fact that he and the Prime Minister have taken the initiative to allow a referendum and let the voice of the Scottish people be heard, and heard, Mr. Speaker, not at some historically sentimental point in the future, but heard as soon as the consultation is cancelled, because Scotland and the UK needs clarity and certainty now.
My honourable friend expresses her disappointment in her usual and characteristic style. I too hope that the Scottish National Party, the Scottish Government, will engage constructively and recognise the fact that it is in the interest of people across Scotland that the two governments work together, get rid of this legal problem and get on with having the referendum on Scotland's place in the United Kingdom.
Mr. Pete Wishart.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Will the Secretary of State please pass on our most sincere and deepest gratitude to his right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, because his clumsy and inappropriate steps into the constitutional question has led to thousands and thousands of people giving their support to the SNP and to the independence cause. There are lots of his friends on the front bench and lots of his Tory friends on the back benches. Can he now encourage them to come to Scotland? The Yes to Independence cause needs to hear from the Conservatives.
There was me hoping that the new year would have brought a generous new spirit from the honourable gentleman, but as ever I am to be disappointed. I love the fact that he wants to get on with the debate. That would make a refreshing change from where the SNP has been for the last 10 months.
Mark Menzies.
As the Secretary of State will no doubt be aware, there's a number of respected economic institutions, including Citigroup, that have highlighted that prolonged uncertainty over Scotland's future is costing investment and ultimately jobs in Scotland. When the Secretary of State next meets the First Minister of Scotland, can I ask him what he's feared of in putting this decision in front of the people of Scotland now?
I might put it slightly differently, if I may say, to my honourable friend, but I've certainly already suggested to the First Minister, and I intend to continue the discussion, that whatever our differences about the future of Scotland, it is important that we can have a proper debate. I believe Scotland is far stronger as part of the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom much the stronger for having Scotland as part of it, whether we look at the economy, our defence, our welfare system, our international clout as Scots within the United Kingdom. So I hope we'll get on with that debate. But in the meantime, let's get a legal, fair and decisive referendum in progress.
Anne Maguire.
Over the last 30 or so years, the one constant in constitutional development in Scotland has been the fact that the Scottish National Party have held to their position that their only position is independence for Scotland. Doesn't the Secretary of State agree with me, or would the Secretary of State agree with me, that it is now faintly surreal that in offering the administration in Edinburgh the opportunity to have a legal basis to hold a referendum which may give them their life's ambition, and they appear to be rejecting it? Isn't that an utterly bizarre position for a party that have not participated in the constitutional development of Scotland over the last 30 years?
The Red Honourable makes a very important point that in all the discussions over many decades about enhancing Scotland's powers within the United Kingdom, the SNP has put its face against being part of that process, occasionally late in the day joining in, but mostly turning its back on that process. That's one thing, but to turn your back on a process that would enable you to have a referendum which is about your life cause, about your entire mission in politics, is very odd indeed. And I hope that when they reflect carefully on this, they will see that this is a very reasonable proposition that sets out a fair basis on which we can get on with the referendum and make sure that all people across Scotland can make this most historic decisions. And I believe when they do, they will stay within the United Kingdom.
Mr. William Cash.
Given that Scotland is within the European Union by virtue of a United Kingdom treaty as implemented by the Westminster European Communities Act 1972, if there were to be an independent yes vote, does the Secretary of State accept that that would require a referendum of the United Kingdom as a whole?
Right at the end, almost to the end, I thought for once I might be in agreement with my honourable friend on a matter to do with Europe. I think he's right to raise the issue of Europe because Scotland's membership of the European Union, were we to become an independent country, would not be something that could be taken for granted. There would have to be a process to get into the European Union, which is vitally important for our economy. And so, on that basis, I hope we will find common cause.
Mr. Brian Donohoe.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I seek an assurance from the Secretary of State that the uncertainties that this situation has arisen by virtue of the time that is taken to get to the point where we have a referendum is very damaging to the possibilities of inward investment. Right now I'm trying to have inward investment of some size into my constituency, and it's highly probable that as a consequence of that the high levels of unemployment that I have within the constituency will remain. Then can you give me an assurance that this process will take place sooner rather than later?
If I may say so, the honourable gentleman makes a really important point from his own constituency, aware as I am that huge decisions are being contemplated, not just for his part of Ayrshire, but for all parts of Scotland. And investors do not like uncertainty. We've seen the Citigroup report, we've seen the CBI's observations and the Institute of Mechanical Engineers. It is bad for Scotland, it's bad for the UK to have this uncertainty. I want to see the referendum sooner rather than later, and we'll do everything in our powers to ensure that we can do that.
Anne Main.
I'm really pleased that my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has grasped this particular thistle. If they're intending to build HW2 or Adrian's Wall 2, surely we need to know this, because there will be a number of large projects that will stop short of going to Scotland should they not wish to be part of the Union.
I don't know how many questions you took, Mr. Speaker, on High Speed 2, but I think that was a clever, ingenious further one in this particular moment. But my honourable friend is entirely right to highlight that for High Speed 2 to get to Scotland, it really does require everybody to be working together, that an independent Scotland, who knows what they might think of that. But let's not forget, it's not just High Speed 2, it's lots of defence projects that are hugely dependent in Scotland, are part of the Scottish economy, whether it's on the Clyde or in Fife, wherever it might be. And for many, many reasons, I think Scotland should continue to be within the UK.
Mr. Ian Lucas.
Is it the position of the UK government that the referendum should take place within 18 months of today?
No, and I have, when the honourable gentleman looks at the consultation paper, he will see there is no date set in the consultation. I certainly believe it should be sooner rather than later, and I hope to persuade the Scottish Government and people across Scotland that we should have it within a period that's as soon as possible. 18 months is not a position of the Government, and it's not within this consultation document.
Mr. Alan Reid.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the statement. The Electoral Commission is independent and the only body with the expertise to oversee this referendum. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it would be an outrage if the referendum proceeded as per the SNP's draft bill, where it was to be overseen by a body that wasn't independent of the Scottish Government? The SNP have a mandate to hold a referendum. They don't have a mandate to rig a referendum.
Well, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend that it is vitally important that in this debate people can have confidence in the referendum process, that it has a legal basis, that it is fair and that it will get a clear, decisive outcome. And the role of a body such as the Electoral Commission will be vital to that, because only through the neutrality, the independence and indeed the experience that it has could we get the confidence so that the process, the rules were not an issue. And I hope that as we discuss and debate this across Scotland, people will agree that the Electoral Commission is the right body to oversee this referendum.
Dr Ailid Whiteford.
Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State's already responded to a question this afternoon about the eligibility of 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the referendum. I have only had a chance to have a fairly cursory look at the draft order attached to his consultation paper, but perhaps he can clarify whether or not it will be the case that European citizens living in Scotland will be eligible to vote in the referendum, but 16 and 17-year-olds will not be. And can I ask him, I understand the pressures of government, but will he support his own party's policy, and there have been long-standing proponents of 16 and 17-year-olds having the vote, and support the rights of 16 and 17-year-olds to vote?
Can I say to the Honourable Lady, what we're proposing is the same basis for election, the same franchise as was good enough for the First Minister and every MSP in the Scottish Parliament. I find it slightly strange that people would argue that that wasn't somehow a legitimate franchise in which to be elected. And as to my own party's position, I was clear about that earlier on. But I also made the point, and I hope she would accept this, that we can argue about the role of 16 and 17-year-olds in the democratic process legitimately for all elections and all referenda and electoral events. To pick it out on one moment, to apply it in this particular circumstance, I think would be wrong. But let's have the debate. Let's see what people across Scotland believe.
Seeking now single supplementary questions of stunning succinctness, my eyes look no further than Dr Julian Lewis.
I knew that would be the case. Does the Secretary of State believe that there is any danger of the SNP boycotting a legitimate referendum, and if so, what would be the outcome if the vote were in favour of remaining in the United Kingdom?
The honourable gentleman invites me to consider a hypothetical which I do not believe will be the reality. I think it is important, and I believe it would be very strange if the Scottish Government didn't, that they engage in the process of discussing this. They consider the aspects that we're putting forward in the consultation today about giving a legal basis for a referendum, having a fair process and a decisive outcome. I think that's important, and it would seem to me very strange if they were to turn around and say they didn't want to be part of this process.
Mr Jamie Reid.
Thank you, Speaker. The decision, of course, of independence is the sovereign right of the Scottish people, but has consequences for the rest of the citizens of the United Kingdom. Will the Secretary of State raise with the Scottish Government the precise date upon which the radioactive materials from Scotland stored in my constituency will be returned to Scotland in the event of independence?
My honourable friend from a sedentary position says a toxic question. What I would say to him is he raises one of many issues we've had sight of this afternoon that need to perhaps be debated when we get on to the referendum. What I'm trying to do this afternoon is make sure that reasonably and quickly we get on to that very referendum.
Louise Mensch.
Fastest growing town in England, and it boasts one of the largest concentration of people of Scottish heritage and descent south of the border. I'm grateful to see that my right honourable friend says that people out with Scotland will be consulted during this consultation. Can he assure me that Scots who are living outside of Scotland will get the chance to have their voices heard?
We will not restrict this consultation to people who consider themselves Scots. Wherever they might live, in Monaco or elsewhere, they will be entitled to take part in this consultation. When it comes to the vote, I think following internationally agreed precedents, it would be important that it's the people in Scotland who make that decision.
Mr Lindsay Roy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What approaches has the Secretary of State made to discuss referendum issues with the Scottish Government so far, and what has been the response?
As I referred to earlier on, I spoke to the First Minister earlier this afternoon, and I hope we'll be able to meet soon to discuss the proposals that we've set out in this consultation. We have, of course, for some time been discussing with colleagues in the Scottish Government when they were going to bring forward their own proposals on referendum. None has been forthcoming, although I hear that today they might be hurrying that up. We have provided the basis for a discussion, and I hope the two governments can work well together for the people of Scotland.
John Thurso.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend and indeed a number of other honourable members have referred to the uncertainty, particularly over jobs and investment. Can I tell my right honourable friend that mature opinion in the far north, whether it be in favour of the United Kingdom or in favour of independence, recognises that uncertainty and wishes to see it resolved? Will he therefore ensure that his consultation goes to those of mature political opinion throughout Scotland and ignore the bleatings of the nationalist playpen opposite?
I think everybody in Scotland, whatever their temperament, will be welcome to be part of this consultation. But I agree with him. There are many from both sides of the debate who want the clarity, get the legal certainty that we are offering, and get on with the debate, which, after all, has been the reason the SNP has existed for decades. So I still am not sure why it is they are resisting a way forward. I hope that when we discuss the detail, they will agree with us and we will resolve this and get on and have the referendum.
Mr. Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for calling me. And I welcome the forthright and determined approach that the government is taking in ensuring that the most important constitutional issue to affect our nations is being taken by the scruff of the neck, quite frankly, and driven by the front bench. Does he accept that uncertainty about the Union in Northern Ireland caused decades of economic hardship, and that the sooner we get this matter resolved for the rest of the kingdom, the better? And that it is absolutely essential that the government harnesses all of the support across this House on opposition benches as well as government benches and our colleagues in Scotland to ensure together we maintain the Union.
Can I, with all due deference to the honourable gentleman, say that I wouldn't draw a comparison necessarily between the experience in Northern Ireland and the experience in Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom for very obvious reasons, and the really sensitive challenges that Northern Ireland has faced over a very long period of time. But where I would agree with them is that uncertainty is bad for business, it's bad for Scots and others in the UK planning their lives and their future. I want to get that uncertainty resolved and get on with the actual referendum, during which I am confident Scotland will vote to continue to be part of the United Kingdom.
I'm keen to accommodate the interest of colleagues as always, but time is pressing and we do have a second reading of an important bill. So I appeal again for brevity from back and front bench alike. Mr. James Clapperson.
Can my right honourable friend confirm that the UK opt-out from the single currency is an opt-out for the UK, and that new candidate countries for the European Union are committed as a matter of law to sign up to the introduction of the euro?
The honourable gentleman makes a very important point.
Cathy Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a great deal of speculation in advance of this statement about so-called sunset clauses. Can the Secretary of State make absolutely clear whether he has completely ruled out setting a date or making some timescale within the order which transfers responsibility to the Scottish Government?
The Honourable Lady makes an important point. We have said in the consultation paper, I've said it many times already, we want this sooner rather than later. We've shown in the draft Section 30 order that it would be possible to include a date by which this should be completed. What we've not done is said what that date should be or the time period leading up to that from the point where we debate it. So we will get on with that process, but it is important that we agree that.
Bob Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituency is in Beckenham in Kent, but I'm a Scot. And I'm surrounded by Scots. I've got a Stuart there, and I'm a Stuart. I'm half a Stuart, and I've got a half Scot beside me in the far end of the House. We're very interested in what happens in Scotland, and I would like to ask the Secretary of State, how can we put our views forward properly as to what happens to our ancestral homeland?
Order. Having heard the question from the Honourable Member for Beckham, I'm all ears. I want to hear the Secretary of State's answer.
The honourable gentleman is right to say the Stuarts have a proud tradition in Scotland, as do many, many others. I don't wish to get into a battle of the clans. I would encourage the honourable gentleman to take a copy of the consultation, and I look forward to his own contribution to it.
Mr Gordon Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We've already heard this afternoon about the SNP's preference for 16 and 17-year-olds to be able to vote in this one-off referendum. Can the Secretary of State tell me if there's been any impediment over the last 5 years to the SNP government in Holyrood lowering the voting age to 16 or 17 for Scottish Council elections?
On matters that are devolved, the Scottish Parliament can determine all the appropriate arrangements. What I've said clearly today is that they cannot do that on a referendum about independence, which is important that we sort it out. But I agree with him that we should judge this by how people have acted rather than what they complain about now.
Ben Wallace.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. 1.9 million Scots voted for unionist parties in 2010, compared to 480,000 who voted for the Scottish Nationalist Party. Westminster Scottish MPs have every right to speak for Scotland with an equal, if not greater, mandate. Could my right honourable friend tell me if he's given any consideration about the tens of thousands of service personnel working either in Scottish regiments or in the British Army posted abroad or in England, and whether they will be allowed a vote or a say in the future of the United Kingdom?
My honourable friend has, of course, represented people in this House from both Scotland and in England, and I think he speaks with authority on these matters, and I absolutely take his point about mandates. He raises an important point about the involvement of defence personnel, and I look forward to his contribution to this consultation.
Tom Harris.
Welcoming today's statement, can I ask the Secretary of State what discussions he's had with ministers about the possibility of a Clarity Act, which might be seen as a somewhat less heavy-handed mechanism to force our nationalist friends to ignore their own base instinct and to offer the Scottish people the fair and honest referendum we deserve?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that nobody here intends to be heavy-handed or force anything. What we want to do is find agreement which will enable us here at Westminster to ensure that the Scottish Parliament has the powers to conduct this referendum and that it does it in a fair and decisive way. We're starting a consultation period today. I look forward to everybody contributing to it.
James Wharton.
The Secretary of State has indicated that he believes that only those who are on the electoral register in Scotland should get to vote in any referendum. Does this extend to registered overseas voters who remain on the Scottish register? And if it does, will he look at possibly extending that facility to those Scots who find themselves living not abroad but elsewhere in the United Kingdom?
As I have said on a number of occasions, we are proposing that the franchise should be that which elects the Scottish Parliament.
Gemma Doyle.
Leader of the Scottish Labour Party has today called for cross-party talks in Scotland on issues including the date of the referendum. And I know the Secretary of State has already welcomed cross-party talks. Can he confirm that the Liberal Democrats would be willing to participate, and also he, in his role as Secretary of State, would participate in such talks?
I'm sure that the new Scottish Labour leader will be talking to my colleague Willie Rennie, the leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, but I agree with the principle. We should all be talking together so that we can ensure that we get the right process for this referendum, we make it legal, we ensure that it's a fair process beyond reproach, and that we get a clear-cut outcome. And I think that's in all our interest, and I welcome the principle that we should all meet to talk.
Sir Robert Smith.
Mr. Speaker, surely the clear message today from this statement is to the Scottish Government to engage in this consultation, because it gives the clearest opportunity for the people of Scotland to have clarity and a debate that's based on the issues and not one that's dragged through the courts.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend.
Mr. John Robertson.
And a good new year to you and all members of the House. At a time when fuel poverty is rising, child poverty is rising, pensioner poverty is rising, is it the cost of this referendum and the cost of the consultation, plus, after we've seen the arrogance today from the members beside me, we're obviously going to end up in court. How much is this going to cost the British taxpayer?
May I reciprocate and wish the honourable gentleman a happy new year as well, and hope we may all be in a good mood throughout it. But say to him that it is, of course there will be a cost to any democratic process, but I think it's clear that we have a major historic decision to make. I'm keen that we get on with that and that we do it in a clear, fair and decisive way.
Ian Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, during the consideration of the 1998 Scotland Act in this place, the then Scottish Secretary, Donald Dewar, said, and I quote, "A referendum that purported to pave the way for something that was ultra vires is itself ultra vires." In the absence of him being able to publish legal advice, would my right honourable friend not agree that that statement makes it perfectly clear where the law stands?
As ever, my honourable friend has been assiduous in his homework, for which I commend him, and say that, indeed, if the late, sadly lost leader, Donald Dewar, when he debated it from this dispatch box all those years ago, did set out very clearly what he believed would or would not be allowable within the law. I think that the Act was well written, it is clear, and I invite everybody to scrutinise it, and I believe that when they do, they will come to the same conclusion as us. Therefore, we need to get on and provide a legal basis for the referendum.
Mr. Stuart Housie.
The Scottish Secretary made great play of what he called uncertainty threatening business investment. So he'll be aware of the Wood Mackenzie report today, which shows record North Sea investment plan for 2012 and consistently high investment going beyond 2014, which rather gives a lie to the allegation he made. So can the Secretary of State come clean with the House? Can he name one single company which has threatened not to invest? Or will he finally do the right thing and apologise for his scaremongering?
The honourable gentleman is not usually so churlish. I think he should understand. He should surely understand better than almost anybody else, because he studies these things carefully, that businesses take decisions on a very long time scale. They are looking for certainty, they want confidence in the future, and as we have seen with the Citigroup report, as we've seen with the Institute of Mechanical Engineers, and the CBI, which the last time I looked spoke for many businesses across Scotland and the UK. Uncertainty is bad for business, it's bad for jobs, and let's get rid of that uncertainty. I can't understand why the honourable gentleman and his friends don't want to resolve this and get on with the real debate.
Mr. David Mowat.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State will have seen today's press reports which say that apparently, as of this week, the Scottish First Minister is now applying the finishing touches to his own referendum plans, and he'll be publishing them in the next month. If that indeed turns out to be the case, would he agree that at last we're making some progress?
Well, I hope that on the basis of the early conversation that we have had and the intent on my part that we should have further discussions, that we will be able to consider the proposals that we have set out in detail this afternoon. And I think it only makes common sense, and it's only the most reasonable proposition on earth, that we should get the two governments working together to provide a legal, certain basis for the referendum, and then we can get on and have this most profound debate about our future in Scotland.
Sheila Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the commitment from the Secretary of State to the broadest possible negotiated and widest discussion within Scotland on this subject. But I would urge him, I hope he'll agree with me, that it is unwise to conduct this debate through statements made in the media or on television programmes, even by people as exalted as the Prime Minister.
I think that over the coming weeks we will have many different ways of contributing to the debate, whether we're politicians or people across Scotland. I look forward, whether it's in my own constituency or any other part of Scotland, to people looking at this consultation, engaging with the issues and giving us their views. It's not about politicians, it's about the people of Scotland.
Lynn Davis.
This debate in Scotland, Mr Speaker, led by the Scottish Government about Scottish independence, causes great uncertainty throughout the United Kingdom, including very much so in Wales. We can't afford this distraction. Now, does my honourable friend agree that this issue should be dealt with as quickly as possible to ensure that governments throughout the United Kingdom, including devolved governments, concentrate and focus on growth and jobs and those things that we really need?
Yes.
Ian Mackenzie.
Mr Speaker, and it comes no surprise that I welcome and agree with the Secretary of State's desire to hold a referendum as soon as possible. And would you agree with me that the SNP government in Scotland's desire to hold a referendum late as possible is an indication of their inability to answer the many questions that have been put to them by the Scottish people on separatism?
Well, as I have said on a few times this afternoon and many times elsewhere, it is a real curiosity that for a party that has existed for one purpose all its time, to be so reticent about getting on with the debate about Scotland's future within the United Kingdom or as a separate country. I hope that we will now get a proper, constructive, reasonable engagement where we can get on with that real debate.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Does my right honourable friend agree with me that a referendum should not involve a sterile discussion of costs and benefits or political advantage, but about the great strengths which Scotland brings within the United Kingdom and being part of the United Kingdom brings to Scotland?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. Mike
Weir.
Speaker, in answer to an earlier question, the Secretary of State again went on about the uncertainty caused by the lack of a referendum. But when the Prime Minister's spokesman was asked about this morning, the only thing he could refer to was a Citigroup report, the same one that the Secretary of State referred to, one specifically on renewables. But if he looks at it, he will know that Gamesa, SG, Doosan Babcock, Mitsubishi, Aquamarine, EDP, renewables...
Order! Mr. Weir, order! This statement has been going on a very long time already. There are still members who wish to get in. And the honourable member who's just resumed his seat knows very well he should have been brief. Secretary of State.
I think the honourable gentleman needs to pay attention to people like the CBI and others and just recognise it's self-evident that when there is uncertainty about the constitutional future of Scotland, the investment decisions will become difficult. So I want to get all question of uncertainty removed from this debate. I can't understand why they seem so reluctant to get on with it.
Joe Swinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the SNP at Holyrood do have a political mandate to hold a referendum on independence, and so I welcome my right honourable friend's plans to devolve the power so this can be held legally and fairly. But would he agree that page 28 of the SNP manifesto clearly shows that mandate is for a simple yes-no question, so that there's no confusion, no legal chaos, just a decisive result decided by the courts, the voters and not the courts?
I say to my honourable friend, there have been a number of months where the prospect of two questions has been bandied around, although when pressed, ministers were unable to answer how you would determine which results to pay heed to if both were given yes votes, particularly if independents got, say, 51% and extra powers got 80%. Apparently independents would have won. We need a single clear question, and I'm glad that after many months of skating around this, the Deputy First Minister yesterday conceded that point and said she wanted a single question herself.
Graham Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the statement from the Secretary of State. Could he therefore confirm that if the UK Government devolves the power to hold a referendum on separation, as he has said, to the Scottish Government, Alex Salmond would have no excuses left whatsoever from getting on this year or next year at the very latest in holding a referendum on Scotland's future?
I want that referendum to take place sooner rather than later. We are offering to fix a problem that exists and make sure that in a reasonable way we can get on and conduct that referendum. I hope we'll be able to work together with the Scottish Government to get those issues resolved and get on with that debate.
Mary MacLeod.
Speaker. I welcome the statement and I congratulate the Government for their leadership on this very important matter to Scotland and also the United Kingdom as a whole. And may I ask the Secretary of State just what reassurance he has had from the Scottish Nationalist Party and also in the First Minister that they will work with the UK Government on this and accept a fair, legal and decisive referendum?
I hope the Scottish National Party will engage with this. I'm pretty sure they will, because when they get the chance to study the detail, they will see that what we're offering is a very reasonable process by which we can get rid of the legal uncertainty and get on and have a fairly conducted and decisive referendum.
Jim McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to ask the Secretary of State for Scotland, is he aware, and going back to what an earlier member said about the manifesto, the SNP, as far as I'm aware, said nowhere in their manifesto that a referendum would take place in the second part of the Parliament. They only said a referendum would take place. They constantly tell us that they have an overwhelming mandate to hold a referendum in the second half of the Parliament. That's strictly not true.
Yeah. The manifesto was clear that it was about a straightforward question on independence, not about the timing. We believe that this should happen sooner rather than later, and I look forward to the responses we get from people across Scotland.
Fiona Bruce.
Given the references we have heard in the public debate on this matter to legally binding referenda and consultative referenda, would the Secretary of State agree that this is a totally false distinction?
My honourable friend has put her finger right at the heart of the issue. There is no distinction in the legal status of referendum in Scotland between one that might be considered advisory, consultative, or on the one hand, or so-called legally binding on the other. The Scottish Parliament does not have the power to have a referendum on independence. We are offering a way by which we can devolve that power on a fair and reasonable basis that will ensure we get a clear and decisive outcome.
Katie Clark.
The Minister will be aware that the SNP are putting a significant amount of effort into fundraising, given that this is basically everything that they're all about. What does he think his role should be in ensuring that there's a full debate in Scotland? Because does he agree with me? Many people in Scotland have not really given proper consideration to the arguments for and against separation.
The Honourable Lady gets to the heart of the issue about how we would conduct the referendum when it takes place and the need for it to be done on a basis which is recognised and not challenged by people who are either participants or who are voters. And I think it's very important that spending limits and all other aspects of the rules of the process are clear. And it's for that reason that we are suggesting that the Electoral Commission might be or would be the appropriate way to oversee the process. And I hope that as we debate this, people will agree on that point.
Philip Hollowburn.
Constituents in Kettering deserve a say on the future make-up of the United Kingdom just as much as his constituents in Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. The way to overcome the legal challenge is not to devolve the powers to the Scottish Government, but to hold a UK-wide yes or no referendum with the result announced in two parts. One, the results from Scotland, and second, the results from everywhere else. Because it may well be that Scotland votes to stay, but the rest of the country invites Scotland to leave.
If I may say so, I regret the slightly discordant tone of my honourable friend's observation. I think, and I've answered the point several times already, it is important that we follow what is, I think, the democratically appropriate route and what is internationally recognised as the way of doing this, and allow for self-determination within Scotland on this important issue.
William McRae.
Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome the Secretary of State's statement to the House today. Can the Secretary of State assure me that this government will be robust in its defence of the Union?
Which Union?
I'm absolutely committed to Scotland remaining part of the United Kingdom. When we can get on to that actual debate, then I will be very clear and arguing the case on that day in, day out. At the moment, we have to get to that debate, and today we have offered a very reasonable, straightforward way that we might do that.
Russell Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I say to the Secretary of State, my honourable friend from Dundee is exactly right. The SNP manifesto last year made no reference whatsoever to the second half of the Parliament. But does the Secretary of State feel that if the legal powers are transferred and the SNP have a good showing in this May's local government elections, that the First Minister might just take a gamble, ignore the second half of the Parliament and go for a snap referendum?
I'm not going to speculate on the election results in May, but I agree with him that we should get a clear basis for the referendum and that we should get it sooner rather than later.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State has made a big issue of a point of law, but Professor Stephen Tierney, Professor of Constitutional Theory at Edinburgh University, said in June last year the Scottish Parliament has the authority to stage a referendum. So does the Secretary of State agree that Scotland's democratic Parliament does not need Westminster's permission for a self-determination referendum, although a generous spirit from the Westminster Government would indeed be welcome?
I'm afraid, for reasons that should now be obvious, I don't agree with the honourable gentleman.
Neil Griffith.
Will be aware that in Wales a convention process took place before the referendum on further powers. Can he explain exactly how he will ensure the fullest possible participation by trade unions, the business community and a genuinely representative cross-section of civic society in the consultation he's announced?
This consultation is open to everyone in Scotland, and indeed across the United Kingdom or elsewhere, should they wish to offer their opinions. I'm confident that we'll get a good response, and I hope that when we do, we'll then be able to chart a way to getting a legal, fair and decisive referendum and get a proper decision about Scotland's place in the United Kingdom.
David.
I understand that the Scottish First Minister has made an announcement, but there is indeed to be a referendum in the autumn of 2014. Would he give his reaction to that indication, if it is correct or not?
The debate over the timing of this referendum is one I anticipate will take place for a long time to come, unless we resolve the legal basis on which a referendum might take place. At the moment, no referendum could take place started by the Scottish Parliament. We are determined to ensure that we give the power to the Scottish Parliament in the appropriate way, and we can get on with that debate as soon as possible.
Kevin Brennan.
He's left till the end, Madam Deputy Speaker. Aren't the SNP wrong to say that there's never been binding referendums in the UK before? Wasn't the AV referendum, the unsuccessful AV referendum which his government held last year, a binding referendum?
If I may say to the honourable gentleman, the issue here is not whether it's binding, consultative, advisory or whatever other adjective you wish to apply to the referendum. At the present time, the Scottish Parliament could not bring forward a referendum on a legal basis. We want to ensure that they can, and we're offering the way that we can do that through this consultation.
Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not just the euro, is it, that an independent Scotland would have to sign up to if it wanted to join the European Union? It would also have to sign up to Schengen, because European law makes it absolutely clear that that would have to happen. So would we be considering setting up borders, control borders, between England and Scotland?
Can I say, as a Member of Parliament representing the longest stretch of that border between Scotland and England, that I hope we are never in the position where such a border or such barriers might exist. I'm confident that when we get on to the proper debate, that will not be the way it ends up.
Secretary of State, thank you very much. I think 57 backbench members participated in that statement. So.